Hello again, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Free to Speak. Paul and I are not able to do a video this week, so what we decided to do was put together a best of Free to Speak with some of our favorite moments from Free to Speak. Maybe these aren't necessarily the best moments, but they're kind of the moments that maybe we consider to be the highlights of what we've done. So we'll show this for this week, and hopefully you'll enjoy this and seeing some of our favorite moments over the last 33 episodes. And we'll be back later in hopefully 7 days for a new video. Bye for now. Basically what it means to be woke on paper is to be aware of issues of social injustice and actively involved in addressing them and in confronting them. And Paul, we don't have any objections to that. We agree with that, right?
Yeah, essentially we pro wokeness in that, but if we are to follow the academic description of what it is, yeah, we are pro it, but then we felt we need to talk about what it has become, because there's what it has become and what it is. They are different things. And what it has become is what it shouldn't be. I'm good at giving examples. In Uganda, we have tribes, and there are tribes that are assumed to be, in a privileged position, and then others are being mistreated by the other tribes in power. But this is not now. It has always been. And even in 50 years ago, there was another tribe in power, and people thought the same. But it's not the entire tribe which is a problem. So sometimes it's just a particular few people. This is what happens. We're having a small substrata of a particular group, and we're stereotyping everyone from that group, and we're judging them, and then we're attacking the wrong people. Because essentially the people who are actually having the power to oppress, you can't approach them. They're untouchable. Then in the end, you find yourself attacking innocents who have nothing to say in how things are moving. There might be a strong white person who is racist and all, but they're strong. You can't do anything about it apart from shouting, maybe on social media. But you'll find yourself mistreating another white man who is on the low end of things, and they're not subscribing to those things. But then you find yourself stereotyping them, and it's unfair for that person.
When you start talking about things like white supremacy culture, the entire white culture is supremacist in nature. And so what we're talking about is the extremes within wokeness.
We're not saying that we don't acknowledge the injustice has happened, especially historically. There's been that injustice for a while, and it's not like it's not there now. So basically, what is a woman? What is a man?
What is a woman?
What is gender? What is sex?
So we can answer those questions
easily.
Easily. But I think that when you ask these people, what is a woman?
They'll struggle.
They'll give you a definition, but it'll be circular. They'll say someone who identifies as a woman.
Okay.
And then you respond by saying, okay, what is that? And then they'll say, a woman. And if you see the movie by Matt Walsh, it's called What is a Woman? That is exactly what happens when he talks to some of these experts. He says, what is a woman? And they say, well, a woman is someone who identifies as a woman. Okay, what is that? And they'll go, a woman. You know what a woman is, right?
What is it?
Okay, we can answer. A woman.
Yeah.
Okay. A woman is an adult biological female, XX chromosomes. A man is
adult male
with XY chromosomes. And I know that somebody will bring up the fact that there is a certain disorder. There's like a small number of people.
Intersex is a disorder.
Let's say that I say that a human being has 2 legs. But let's say I only have 1 leg. Does that mean legs exist on a spectrum? Maybe as a human you can have 1 leg or 2 legs, or maybe there can be a whole number of legs. This is the example that I heard from Matt Walsh. We don't say those sort of things, because we know that if somebody doesn't have 1 leg, we know that something somewhere along the line went wrong, because humans should have 2 legs, and by their nature should have 2 legs. So you don't say that because there are these real examples where there's a disorder related to sex and gender, that somehow that means that gender is on a spectrum. There could be a whole number of genders. The argument just doesn't work.
It doesn't.
Started with this idea that people should be able to go to the bathroom of whatever gender they identify with. And now we're in this situation where there's an 82-year-old woman who 2 years ago was kicked out of a YMCA because she complained that there was a biological male in her locker room who was undressing in front of girls, in front of minors. These were children. She went to complain, but the response of the YMCA was to expel her.
You know, that it's a way like altering objective reality.
But she's actually suing the YMCA, taking them to court. Whether or not she'll win, I don't know.
Probably not. But she would win in Uganda.
She would probably win in Uganda, yeah.
But even in Uganda, it will be tricky because even the judges fear such cases because these cases they draw so much attention from the people who are giving us money anyway. We're slowly adopting what the Western world has adopted, and while it's being imposed on us, because I don't think we are buying it 100%, but it's being imposed on us basically because we are poor, and these countries they're able to fund some projects here, they're able to fund our budget and whatever. So you find that the reason why this is happening is because of pressure from people from your side,
Right.
It's not Bob, it's the people from your side. They're probably pressuring them to accept this thing that is actually taboo in our culture as Africans. They are forcing us to accept what we would ideally think is unacceptable in our culture. And how they're doing it is they're stewarding it through using money and funds. I've worked in the non-profits for a while. I know friends who lost their jobs because funding was taken away because Uganda was all of a sudden a transphobic place. So they took away funding. People lost jobs, and it was unfair for them because these are battles of politics.
You can look at it that this is a form of cultural imperialism where you see in America taking its values, or the West taking its values, and trying to enforce them onto Uganda.
That's why it's good that I'm talking with a native English speaker, because now he has brought it out. It's cultural.
This is a real example of cultural imperialism, but it won't be recognized as such because it doesn't conform to the woke narrative. To call it cultural imperialism, the West is trying to take its LGBTQ values and impose them onto Africa. Are we putting too much emphasis on the dangers of the malpractice of wokeness, or is it something we should be concerned about?
Well, we're in an era where wokeness has come of age, and not just come of age, but it has, it has become way too malpractice that we can't just stand and ignore.
Right.
It's in our faces, so we need to respond.
It's in our faces, but not only that, it's leading to injustices and inequalities. And if you stand against those injustices, you will be the ones who will be punished. And I wanted to give an example of this, Paul, to show that this is not just something we're making up. This is real. This is a news story, actually in the state of West Virginia. West Virginia passed a law called the Save Women's Sports Act. And basically what this law does, it's a state law that prohibits transgender girls from competing against biological girls in sports. However, a court, I think it was the 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, in a 2-1 ruling, overthrew that law. And there was actually a track and field competition in which a biological male finished in first place in the shot put and second place in the discus event. This then caused 5 middle school girls. Okay, so here's the thing. The adults don't have the courage to stand up against this. It's the girls who are having the courage to stand up and protest. So they protested, and the way that they protested was they stepped into the shot put circle, and then they stepped out without a throw, resulting in a foul, and then, I guess, a forfeit. Basically what happened. It was their way of protesting. But as a result of that, the 5 girls were prohibited from participating in the next full day event. So they were the ones who were actually punished because they stood up and said, this is wrong, we're going to protest this.
So what was the argument for punishing them?
You know, it doesn't really say in the article, but they're transphobic, they're being bigoted, they're being intolerant. I would imagine the same kind of woke arguments.
Okay.
Yeah, I would imagine. The article doesn't say that I read what the arguments were.
It's just woke culture,
Yeah.
getting us more confused.
Getting us more confused.
Yeah.
But I think the thing is, for those, and I want to say probably for some of our African audience, this is what you have to look forward to if you allow your culture to be transformed by these values, by the activists who would push these values. Because what they will do is they will change your society. They will not respect your traditions and culture, because if you speak up and protest, you will be the one who is punished. You know, they're even willing to punish girls. You know, the adults don't have the courage to stand up. In this example I just gave, the adults don't have the courage to stand up. But it's the children who are standing up because they're the victims of it. But then they're also the ones who are punished by it. Oftentimes the pro-choice people are unwilling to acknowledge the argument that a fetus is a human life. You can present all the evidence to them, but they just will not listen. And it's kind of pointless sometimes to debate with them or argue with them because they won't even acknowledge the point. They'll just sidestep it. So basically what we did, Paul, with our videos, we started out by acknowledging that the difference between the pro-choice and the pro-life camps is that the pro-life people believe or acknowledge that an unborn baby or a fetus is a human life, is a separate human life, and is not part of a woman's body. And the pro-choice people will argue that the fetus is a part of a woman's body, but in order to do that, they have to ignore all of the evidence that a fetus is a human life. So that's kind of how we started, and we kind of went through and tried to demonstrate how an unborn baby or a fetus is a human life, and how many of the motivations behind getting abortions are selfishly motivated by people who want all the benefits of sex without the responsibility associated with the consequences of sex. But then we also talked about that there are exceptions.
Yeah.
You know, so we talked about we're willing to make exceptions in cases of rape, incest, and things like that.
Maybe we need to explain why. Why are we willing to concede some exceptions?
Yeah. Well, I think I did a little bit of that, if you want to add some of that, but I think I did a little bit of that in our videos of the past, because I was saying that I was willing to take that off the table, because one of the arguments that pro-choice people typically make is if you ban abortions, you're going to ban abortions for all these extreme circumstances too. I'm willing to acknowledge that there are exceptions to everything, because there are. There are exceptions to everything. So if we just take that off the table, these are only a small number of cases, maybe 1% to 2% fall into these exceptional cases. You know, we take that off the table and we just acknowledge, yes, there are these exceptions, but the exceptions don't justify the rule. You can't go from, there are these exceptional circumstances like rape and incest. You can't make a leap from that to just saying there should be abortion on demand. It's inside a woman's body, therefore she can do whatever she wants. It just doesn't logically follow. And I don't know if you wanted to maybe present more about that.
Yeah, so about exceptions, I've talked about my experience working with war victims, and I know that especially for things like rape, many children have been born out of rape. So some ladies have braved whatever the pains of being raped and the trauma that comes with it, and they've still bore their children, and they've lived to love their children and cherish them, and they've lived to become good parents to their children, even with the absence of the fathers who are the rapists in question. But then I've also seen those who have really struggled because they couldn't abort, because let's say they were very traditional or they were very religious about it, and they've struggled with the children. They hate their children. They are mistreating the children because the child is a reminder of that very traumatic experience. So the child is more of a trigger to their emotional reactions to trauma that happened. The idea is that the bond between this mother and the child is really going to be strained, and the chances that the mother will love the child are quite minimal, much as they are there, especially given the idea of, engaging them in therapy. They're able to forgive their children, even though the children have no fault in what happened. They're able to move on and forgive them and appreciate them and know that these children are actually not the reason why, they were raped. Rather, they were just an outcome of, the bad incident. but then they're innocent. But over time, even these extreme cases, the parents have learned to love their children. So I like to talk about the medical implications. So if a doctor runs their test and maybe they think going on with the pregnancy is a risk pregnancy for the mother, or the mother will probably die, even before giving birth, or the child you might carry may not even live even after giving birth, then probably those are reasonable premises to actually abort.
Right, reasonable premises.
So,
yes.
So
I like that better. It's not necessarily mandatory that you should, but it's a reasonable premise.
So yeah, you can logically listen. Our idea is if someone is engaged in sex, they just go to the bar, they get high, they expose themselves, they sleep with a barman or they sleep with whoever, and then tomorrow they're like, oh damn, I'm now pregnant.
Yeah.
I don't want this baby. But then those are consequences of your reckless life. We tell men to man up, so I'll probably tell you to woman up and face the consequences of some of your actions. If you got high and let's say you signed the wrong check and then the company lost money, would you reverse that? Maybe not.
Yeah, maybe
so
not.
You face the consequences of your getting high. You don't bet on someone's life because of your reckless behavior.
Right. We also talked about there are alternatives, like adoption, for example, that there's no such thing as an unwanted pregnancy, at least in the U.S. I can't say about here in Uganda, but in the U.S. there's no such thing as an unwanted pregnancy because somebody wants that baby. Because there are more couples that want to adopt a child than there are abortions performed in the U.S. every year. You hear all these things about America is trying to make the world safer for democracy and so forth. And you hear all of these things that you tell people to convince them that this war is justifiable or that we need to overthrow this dictator, because whatever. That's actually a good transition, and it leads into another comment that we have here, Paul. This person wrote, Bobby is right about the United States getting involved in wars and disputes that they have no business getting involved with. He used Gaddafi as an example. We talked about Libya.
Yeah.
But I think Bobby meant America's support for Saddam Hussein. I don't know why he thought I meant that, but I think this is another example. So he's given another example, but it's kind of worded kind of funny. So he's given another example of Saddam Hussein during the 1980 and 1988 Iraq-Iran war, when American presidents tolerated Saddam Hussein during nerve gas attacks on Iran, as Iran was then and still is the enemy. So here, because you got this conflict between Iran and Iraq, but Iran is considered to be the enemy of the US, we're then supporting Iraq because, the enemy of our enemy is our friend, kind of. But then, all of a sudden in 1990, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, everything changes. Then suddenly Saddam Hussein becomes the enemy. So as this commenter says here, Saddam Hussein then moves on officially to become the enemy because of oil and because Israel pushed us to sanction and attack Iraq. The United States support for Israel is why the United States bombed Iraq. Some of this is worded kind of funny, but the U.S. supports sending arms to Israel, and Israel was pushing for the U.S. to attack Iran. So there's kind of motivations behind this, where we're being pressured by our allies to then turn on somebody that we considered at one time to be a friend because they were an enemy to another enemy. So the enemies change when our agendas change.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
so basically, one way you can say the superpowers, they use the other smaller powers. They use them, and when they dump them after using them, they could easily turn the guns on you tomorrow. So.
Right. So for these smaller countries, if the United States is on your side today, the moment
there's no guarantee they'll be with you tomorrow. So
because if you don't serve their interests tomorrow, they'll turn on you.
Yeah.
So, and you said that strip clubs were illegal in Uganda, and what about pornography? Is pornography legal in Uganda?
Yeah, pornography is illegal.
To either produce it or to consume it?
Yeah, it's illegal. It's illegal. And of course people get it.
What happens to, how do they enforce? How do they, is there enforcement, or do people just watch it and they get away with it as long as...
Yeah, so ideally, I'll start with, there was a time of elections around 2021 where they switched off internet in Uganda. We could not access social media, but people got VPNs. If you go to your phone, let's say, or your computer, and you try to access a porn website, you won't access it. But then people are using VPN. Let's say you're showing a movie, a pornography movie, because there are cinema halls for the low end people, not the cinemas of 3D, but there's cinema halls where the average Ugandan goes, where you pay almost 200 shillings to watch a movie, 500 shillings. But so those some of these cinemas, they show blue movies. I don't know if is it called blue movies in America as well?
Yeah, well, that's a term, yes.
So they show blue movies once in a while, but police can come and grab everyone watching that movie.
Yeah.
And they'll struggle. they'll have to face the law as well.
Well, that leads me to another question of where do we draw the line between a movie that has pornographic content and a movie that has sexual content? Because my wife and I go to movies at the cinema on a regular basis, and every once in a while they have movies that would be considered rated R in the United States, and they have strong sexual content in it, and yet these seem to be allowed to go. And I know that sometimes things seem less restrictive than they are in the U.S. because I'll be in the mall and I'll hear a song in the background at the mall that has uncensored language that wouldn't even be allowed in public necessarily in the United States, but it's here, and it's you have like F words and graphic language type things, and sometimes I wonder about where is that kind of line in terms of what's acceptable here and what's not acceptable here, and how do they determine where that line is?
We have laws. Sometimes the laws are just for whoever is seeing the constitution to know that we have a constitutional government, or we have a constitutional governance or law enforcement. But some of these laws are not actually actively enforced, But it's also it's also interesting for you to say that you've listened to music with profane content.
Well, I was in the mall and I'm hearing in the background, the music in the background has the uncensored.
Yeah, but then
ironically,
that music is still American.
It's American music, but they're playing it.
Yeah, because I've watched
publicly, which they couldn't even do that in an American mall.
Interesting, because I've not been to America still anyway, but I've seen shows where the Lil Wayne is singing his music uncensored.
Well, okay, but there's two types of television in the United States. There's over-the-air TV, and then there's cable or satellite TV. Cable or satellite TV does not have those restrictions, but over-the-air TV is very strongly regulated. So, for example, you can't use, like the F word, for example, over-the-air on American television. And on radio, if they're playing songs, I'm about to have the best effing night of my life, that song, whatever, they have to cut that word. They can't have that word in there on the radio. And they can get in trouble if they play that song unedited. Because there's restrictions like that. But it varies from...
And those double standards, really.
They are double standards, but the rationale behind it is that anybody can access free television stations and free radio stations. But you have to actually pay to get satellite or cable TV. So you have to walk into that. You actually have to choose to have that. And that's the argument to why they're stricter. I'm not saying, there's still not inconsistency here. But these are maybe some of the things I've noticed about America versus Uganda is America has this hypocritical double standard. You can go to a movie, you can hear as much bad language as you want, but you can't turn on the radio and hear that same bad language. And if a station plays that song, they can get in trouble with the FCC.
Yeah, maybe the issue with the radio station is that children can listen to the radio station.
Because it's a free anybody can turn it on.
Yeah, but not everyone will go to the cinema.
And the movies are restricted. Like, for example, an R-rated movie. Movies that I can get into here in Uganda, for example. Like, I go to the cinema, there's no restrictions. And I see kids, or, adults bringing in children to movies that would be considered R-rated. Of course, in the U.S., you can bring a kid to an R rating. It's just okay, I take it back. R-rated means children can't go without an adult. So maybe, but I don't know if there's any rules that say that if a 16-year-old, for example, goes to the cinema and says, I want to go see Monkey Man, which is an R-rated movie, or Beekeeper, which is an R-rated movie in the U.S., will the theater let them in without an adult? In the U.S., they won't. But here, my impression is they would.
Yeah, though here cinema is really for the high-end people. It's not. I don't think that's something the government will really worry about, because less than 0.1% of the country
people go to movies.
Movies, like 0.1, even less than 0.1, way less than 0.1 of the country. So it's not a public problem. Bobby struggles to say the N word because every time it happens, you can see he's getting shocked. But then for me, I'm like, okay, that's not a big deal because the word has lost its meaning or its value to us Ugandans. Because if you go to the lower class of people, the N word is it's a word of pride. You know, you're proud to be the N word. So, and I think it's the same in the urban community in America. They also call themselves nigger, nigger this, nigger that. But then I can say that word here, but I believe Bobby cannot say it even now, because for him, his conscience doesn't let him do it. Yeah, but then if we have a society where this conscience we bring back this kind of shame, where my conscience won't let me speak words that are profane. Then we have a more sane community to live in.
Right. You know, it's interesting you're talking about that word I can't say. my wife and I have a TikTok page we do together called Chocolate and Vanilla. And we did a joke where we're playing this song where it's like, I can say, you know, the N-word, the word I can't say.
Yeah.
And in the video, she's singing the song and then turns around to me, and you know, like she's kind of like pretending like she's dancing and she's kind of singing along with it. I'm looking at her with like, as a joke, humorously, I'm looking at her with my mouth, you know, dropped open and my eyes like shocked, like and she's like saying, I can say, you know, that word.
Yeah, I know, and it's, you know,
I still can't say the word.
It's a sort of a black privilege, you know. You know, me, I'm in Uganda, so I don't know much. I know just a little bit. But the problem with people who are, let's say, supporting Democrats, they are supporting Democrats regardless.
Yes.
No matter, even if they got polled from Uganda and I stood as president of the United States as a Democrat, I will still get a very substantial amount of votes because I'm a Democrat. But then, many a time,
because the whole point is to defeat Trump.
They just want to defeat Trump, regardless of who is standing against
Even
him.
though you have Democrats, like, why won't Democrats support Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who would actually be a perfect anti-establishment candidate who subscribes to generally the Democratic platform values of he generally subscribes to the platforms of the Democratic Party. But the reason why they won't support him is because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is like Donald Trump in that he doesn't conform to the narratives and he challenges the establishment narratives. Like, for example, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. dared challenge the whole narrative around COVID and the COVID vaccines. He dared to challenge it, and you can't do that within the establishment.
Exactly.
And even though he subscribes to the values of the Democratic, he subscribes to all the things most of the things that are on the Democratic platform, they're going to demonize him as a conspiracy theorist, just like they demonize Trump, because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. won't jump on the narratives that the privileged and rich in America want him to jump on. And that's why they hate Trump too. So if you think that I'm just promoting Trump, I'm not, because I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. But I'm saying that Trump is at least challenging the narratives on the right. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is challenging the narratives on the left, and I will support anyone who's willing to challenge these narratives.
Maybe we want to take a small video about where we're standing at, the small space where we're at, and we record for our viewers to see, okay, that this Uganda is not as bad as people think. Because I think the less educated American, the one who is in, let's say, in the most remote part of America, would think Uganda is just a jungle. So we shall record a small clip and we shall add it at the end. Yeah, so we said we'll give you a video showing a few things in Uganda, and so right now we're at the lake, so we are showing you it wouldn't be a coastline, it would be the shores of the lake, Victoria. Yeah. So you can see
shoreline.
Yeah, so you can see that. Then the vegetation at a farther distance, there is a pretty nice hotel at the other side of the shores. We're going to show you other spaces, but for now this is where we're at. And so now you can see this sort of avenue, the few trees next to the lake, and so it's a Sunday. and people are, Sundays is like time for family in Uganda, so people are home and either go to church and they go home. So we're having a few. This is closer to the beach, so there are a few destinations for tourists where you can come. This is a place where you can sleep. There are a couple of places, so we're just filming somewhere close to where we are recording from, so don't necessarily mean it's the only space.
All right, welcome to Victoria Mall in Entebbe. So this is a rather interesting place. There's a parking lot. There's a movie theater in there. Grocery store. Lots of different shops. And for those that like Kentucky Fried Chicken, there's even a Kentucky Fried Chicken. Got a Middle Eastern restaurant here. Cafe Java is over here. So yeah, and there's a hotel in there as well. So here we are along Kampala Road in Entebbe. If you head in this direction, that'll take you to Kampala. And then over here, that'll take you deeper into Entebbe. So, got a statue of a lion here. And what? Oh, and the mall's back here. So, yeah, lots of traffic in here. Although it's Sunday, it's not as busy as it normally is.